The spotlight felt like a star being born, and at its center was Jacob Croft. He was the man who had everything: the looks, the charm, and the billion-dollar company Aura Innovations. Tonight at the Starlight Foundation Gala, he was being crowned Innovator of the Year. As he held the Crystal Award, he gave a speech that mesmerized everyone. But the real performance was yet to come. He called his stunning vice president to the stage, and in front of hundreds of cameras, he kissed her. It was a shocking declaration, but the real shock was still waiting in the wings. Because just seconds later, the grand doors opened and his wife Sophia entered. And on her arm was the one man no one ever expected to see. The air in the penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park was thick with the scent of expensive cologne and unspoken tension. Jacob Croft adjusted the silk lapels of his Tom Ford tuxedo. His reflection staring back at him from the floor-to-ceiling window, a man sculpted by ambition and tailored by success. Tonight was his coronation. The Innovator of the Year award from the Starlight Foundation wasn't just another piece of glass for the mantle. It was a testament, a validation of the empire he had built. "Sophia, are you ready? The car is waiting," he called out. His voice smooth, but edged with emotions. He didn't turn to look at her. His focus was on the city below, a sprawling kingdom of lights that he felt with every fiber of his being he deserved to rule. Sophia emerged from the bedroom, a vision in a deep sapphire gown that shimmered like a twilight sky. It was a dress Jacob's stylist had picked out. Sophia had wanted to wear a vintage piece. She'd found something with history and character, but Jacob had dismissed it as dowdy. He wanted her to look the part of his wife, elegant, beautiful, and silent. "I'm ready," she said, her voice a soft counterpoint to his booming confidence. She fastened a simple diamond necklace, a gift from her late father, around her neck. It was her only act of defiance. "Good. Remember tonight when the cameras are on us, it's all about positivity. We're a team. My success is our success," he said, finally turning to face her. He gave her a quick, appraising glance, the kind a man gives a prized racehorse before a big event. He saw the dress, the professionally styled hair, the flawless makeup. He didn't see the fatigue in her eyes or the subtle tremor in her hand as she picked up her clutch. For 5 years, Sophia had lived within this gilded facade. She had met Jacob when he was just a man with a blueprint and a burning hunger in his eyes. She, an art historian with a brilliant mind for research and patterns, had been captivated by his vision. She had believed in him, supported him, and even used a small inheritance from her father to help fund his initial startup, Aura Innovations. She was his first investor, his first believer. Now Aura was a tech giant, a leader in sustainable energy solutions, and Jacob was its king. But along the way, the man she fell in love with had been eroded, replaced by a persona. The shared dreams had become his singular ambition. Her contributions, her late nights, spent researching market trends and poring over competitor analyses, were forgotten, absorbed into the grand narrative of Jacob Croft, the self-made man. The drive to the gala was silent. Jacob was on his phone barking orders at his assistant, his thumb scrolling furiously through his speech. Sophia watched the city lights blur past, feeling like a ghost in her own life. The signs had been there for months, maybe longer. The late nights, he claimed, were board meetings, the scent of a perfume Chanel Num. 5. A scent she never wore, lingering on his suit jackets. The hushed phone calls he would take on the balcony, his back turned to her. And then there was Serafina Vance. Serafina was his vice president of marketing. She was everything. Sophia was not loud, overtly ambitious, and dripping with a sharp, modern glamour. She laughed at all of Jacob's jokes, her eyes lingering on him, in meetings with an admiration that bordered on worship. Jacob had praised her relentlessly, calling her his secret weapon, his right hand. Sophia, with her quiet intelligence and preference for libraries over boardrooms, had been relegated to the role of a relic from his past. Her suspicions had solidified 3 weeks ago. While looking for a document in his home office, she had stumbled upon a folder containing travel itineraries, a business trip to Zurich, 2 first-class tickets, one for Jacob Croft, the other for Serafina Vance. But what truly stopped her heart was the hotel confirmation, a single booking for the Royal Penthouse Suite. For a moment she had felt the floor drop out from under her. The betrayal was a physical blow, sucking the air from her lungs. But then a cold, clear calm washed over her. Tears wouldn't fix this. A screaming match would only result in him gaslighting her, calling her hysterical crazy. He had done it before over smaller things. No Jacob had built his empire on a foundation of carefully constructed lies. She, the quiet researcher, would dismantle it with the simple, unvarnished truth. As their limousine pulled up to the red carpet, flanked by a dazzling sea of camera flashes, Jacob turned to her. His face suddenly illuminated in the brilliant light. He flashed his signature $1,000,000 smile. "Showtime," he said, squeezing her hand. His touch was cold. Sophia smiled back, a serene, almost beatific expression on her face. He mistook it for compliance, for wifely pride. He had no idea it was the calm before the storm. He had no idea that her silence was not weakness, but a weapon being sharpened. He was about to step onto the biggest stage of his life, utterly blind to the fact that she had already rewritten the final act. The ballroom of the Met was a universe unto itself. Crystal chandeliers hung like constellations, casting a warm golden glow on the city's most powerful figures. The air hummed with the low murmur of money, influence, and ambition. Jacob Croft moved through the crowd like a shark, effortlessly navigating the currents of power. He clasped shoulders, laughed with practiced ease, and accepted congratulations with a humility so perfectly feigned it was almost an art form. Sophia followed a few steps behind him, a graceful shadow. She exchanged pleasantries, her smile polite but distant. She saw the way people looked at her, with a mixture of envy and pity. They saw her as the woman who had it all, the beautiful accessory to a great man. None of them saw the woman who had spent the last 3 weeks meticulously deconstructing that great man's life piece by damning peace. They were seated at the main table alongside the foundation's chairman and a handful of other nominees. Serafina Vance was strategically placed at the adjacent table, but her presence was a constant magnetic pull on Jacob. Sophia watched him, his eyes darting towards Serafina, sharing a private smile, a subtle nod. They were so brazen, so confident in her ignorance, that it was almost insulting. The dinner service was a blur of exquisite food that Sophia couldn't taste. Her senses were heightened, every nerve ending tingling with anticipation. She felt like an actress in a play she had written, waiting for her cue. Finally, the moment arrived. The chairman, a portly man named Mr. Abernathy, stood at the podium. After a lengthy preamble about innovation and progress, he opened the envelope. And the 2025 Innovator of the Year award goes to Mr. Jacob Croft of Aura Innovations. The room erupted in thunderous applause. The orchestra swelled. Jacob rose, his face a mask of shocked delight. He kissed Sophia on the cheek, a dry, performative peck for the cameras, and strode towards the stage, basking in the adoration. He was a god in his own pantheon. He accepted the heavy crystal award, holding it up to the lights. The flashes of cameras were like a strobe, fragmenting the moment into a series of triumphant stills. "Wow," he began, his voice thick with manufactured emotion. "I am truly humbled." He launched into a speech that was a masterpiece of corporate poetry. He spoke a vision of relentless drive, of the sacrifices required to change the world. He thanked his team, his mentors, the board of directors. "Building something from nothing," he continued, his voice resonating with passion. "It takes a toll. It requires a partner who understands the vision, who pushes you, who challenges you to be better, not just in the boardroom, but in life. Someone who is not just a colleague, but a true kindred spirit." Sophia felt a cold knot form in her stomach. She knew what was coming. The audience rapt assumed he was talking about his wife. They glanced at Sophia, their faces soft with admiration for this seemingly perfect power couple. "And that's why," Jacob said, his eyes scanning the crowd, "I need to share this moment with the person who has been my true partner in this climb. The person whose brilliance and fire have fueled Aura's ascent. Ms. Serafina Vance, please join me on stage." A collective gasp rippled through the ballroom. Whispers spread like wildfire. Serafina, looking both triumphant and flustered, rose from her seat. She was wearing a blood-red dress that clung to her like a second skin. She practically floated to the stage, her eyes locked on Jacob. He took her hand, pulling her to his side. "This," he announced, his voice booming through the speakers, "is the future." And then he did it. In front of the entire New York City elite, in front of dozens of rolling cameras from news outlets and society blogs, Jacob Croft tilted Serafina Vance's chin up and kissed her. It wasn't a chaste kiss. It was deep, passionate, and utterly damning, a public branding, a declaration of a new reign. The room fell into a stunned, deafening silence. The only sound was the frantic clicking of camera shutters, capturing the precise moment of a man's self-immolation. The applause had died. The smiles had vanished from every face, replaced by masks of shock scandal and morbid fascination. People looked from the stage to Sophia's empty chair, because in the moment Jacob had called Serafina's name. Sophia had quietly stood up and slipped away from the table, unnoticed in the initial confusion. On stage, the kiss ended. Jacob, high on his own audacity, seemed to finally register the chilling silence. His triumphant smile faltered. He looked out at the sea of frozen faces, his brow furrowing in confusion. Where was the adoration? Where was the applause for his bold, modern love story? He scanned the room for Sophia. Perhaps expecting to see her fleeing in tears, cementing his narrative of a weak, outdated wife being replaced by a dynamic partner. But he couldn't find her. And then the grand double doors at the far end of the ballroom swung open with a soft, authoritative thud. Every head turned. The silence deepened, charged with a new, potent energy. A new spotlight, seemingly from nowhere, illuminated the entrance, and there stood Sophia. Poised, radiant, unbroken. The sapphire of her dress seemed to absorb the light, giving her an ethereal glow. Her expression was calm, her posture perfect. But it wasn't her serene beauty that stunned the room into absolute stillness. It was the man she was with. On her arm, looking perfectly at ease, was Adrian Finch, the reclusive, almost mythical billionaire, a man who hadn't been seen at a public event in over a decade, a man so powerful and private that most people in the room thought of him as a ghost, a legend of Wall Street. He was the silent owner of half the companies represented in that very ballroom, a kingmaker who never showed his face. And he was walking into the room arm in arm with the publicly humiliated wife of Jacob Croft. Jacob's face went white. The Crystal Award suddenly felt like a block of ice in his hand. The blood drained from his face as he watched Sophia and Adrian begin their slow, deliberate walk toward the stage. This wasn't the script. This wasn't the play he had written. This was a coup. 3 weeks earlier. The discovery of the Zurich itinerary was not the beginning, but the catalyst. For months, Sophia had been collecting loose threads, tiny inconsistencies that on their own meant nothing. A credit card statement with a charge for a $500 dinner at a restaurant Jacob claimed to hate. A dry cleaning ticket for a woman's silk blouse found in his suit pocket. He'd laughed it off as a mix-up. The way he guarded his phone, angling it away from her even when he was just reading the news. Each was a small, sharp prick to her intuition. But the hotel confirmation was a dagger. That night, after Jacob fell into a deep, self-satisfied sleep, Sophia went into his office. She didn't weep. She worked. Her training as an art historian had made her a meticulous researcher, patient and methodical. She could spend years tracing the provenance of a single painting, following a trail of receipts, letters, and auction records across centuries. Unraveling her husband's lies would be child's play. She started with his laptop. Jacob, in his arrogance, used a simple password, King1. She was in within seconds. She bypassed his emails, knowing he'd be smart enough to have a separate account for his affair. Instead, she went deep into the company's shared server, using his executive-level access. She wasn't looking for love letters. She was looking for financial anomalies. She cross-referenced Serafina Vance's expense reports with Jacob's travel schedule. The overlap was staggering. Lavish dinners, 5-star hotels, client gifts from Cartier and Tiffany's that were never logged in the company's gift registry. He wasn't just having an affair. He was embezzling company funds to finance it. She worked for 3 nights straight, fueled by black coffee and a cold, burning rage. She compiled a spreadsheet color-coded and annotated a testament to his greed. But as she dug deeper into the corporate structure of Aura Innovations, she found something far more significant than petty theft. She was searching for the original incorporation documents, the papers she had co-signed all those years ago. When she found the digital copies, she noticed a detail she had been too young and too in love to question at the time. Aura had been founded with 2 major sources of seed capital, her small inheritance and a massive multi-million-dollar investment from a shell corporation called Finch Holdings Group. Jacob had told her it was an anonymous tech incubator from Silicon Valley that believed in his vision. He'd handled all the paperwork presenting her, with only the signature pages. He'd made it sound like they were minor partners who took a back seat. But the documents told a different story. Finch Holdings Group wasn't a minor partner. They held 75% of the company's primary shares. Jacob Croft, the self-made titan, the king of Aura Innovations, was little more than a high-level manager. He didn't own his empire. He was running it for someone else. The name Finch sparked a memory. Her father, a brilliant but unassuming structural engineer, had worked for a man named Adrian Finch decades ago. He had been a young visionary developer back then. Her father had spoken of him with immense respect, calling him a man of his word and a true gentleman. He had sent the most beautiful bouquet of white orchids to her father's funeral, with a simple handwritten card, "In memory of a good man, AF." Sophia still had the card. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Could it be the same person? It took her another day of cross-referencing public records and old financial news articles. The trail was deliberately obscured, hidden behind layers of LLCs and holding companies, but her research skills were second to none. By the end of the week, she had the undeniable truth. Adrian Finch, the reclusive billionaire, was the silent majority owner of her husband's company. The knowledge was electrifying. It changed everything. This was no longer just about a cheating husband. It was about a colossal fraud. Jacob hadn't just betrayed her. He had betrayed the man who had given him his kingdom. The question now was what to do with this information. Confronting Jacob was pointless. He would lie, manipulate, and try to destroy the evidence. She needed an ally. She needed to talk to the true owner. Finding a way to contact Adrian Finch was like trying to find a ghost. He had no public profile, no social media, and his corporate office was a fortress of secretaries trained to repel all inquiries. So Sophia thought about the man her father had described. A gentleman, a man of his word. She wouldn't get through to him with a business proposal. She had to appeal to the man himself. Remembering the sympathy card, she focused on his past. She spent days in the New York Public Library's archives, digging through old architectural journals and society pages from the 80s. She found what she was looking for, a profile on the young Adrian Finch, which mentioned his passion for collecting rare books, specifically first editions from the Renaissance. She went home and took a small leather-bound book from her father's collection. It was a 17th century treatise on engineering, not particularly valuable, but deeply personal. Inside the front cover, her father had written a small inscription, "To my Sophia, may you always build a life on a strong foundation." She wrote a simple one-page letter. She didn't mention Jacob's affair or the embezzlement. She kept it professional, direct. She introduced herself as the daughter of Thomas Miller, the engineer Adrian had once employed. She explained that she was a co-founder and shareholder of Aura Innovations and had uncovered serious financial and managerial discrepancies that required the immediate attention of the majority shareholder. She concluded by saying she had enclosed a small token of her father's memory as proof of her identity. She packaged the letter and the book and sent it via a bonded courier directly to Adrian Finch's private estate in upstate New York, bypassing the corporate channels entirely. For 3 days, she heard nothing. A sliver of doubt began to creep in. Had she overplayed her hand? Had the package been intercepted and discarded by his staff? Then on the 4th day, her personal cell phone rang. It was an unlisted number. "Ms. Croft," a voice said. It was quiet, deep, and carried an unmistakable weight of authority. "This is Adrian Finch. I believe we have something to discuss." They met 2 days later in the private reading room of a rare book gallery in the Upper East Side, a place Adrian owned under a different company name. The gallery was closed to the public, the silence inside as thick and heavy as the scent of old paper and leather. Adrian Finch was not what she expected. He was in his late 60s, dressed in a simple tweed jacket and grey flannel trousers, not a bespoke suit. He was tall and slender, with kind, intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through pretense. There was no arrogance about him, only a quiet, formidable stillness. The book she had sent was sitting on the table between them. "Your father was a fine man, Sophia." He began, his voice calm and measured. "He had integrity, a rare commodity these days. It seems he passed it on to you." Sophia felt a warmth spread through her chest. "Thank you, sir. He spoke very highly of you." "Please call me Adrian," he said with a small smile. "Now, you mentioned discrepancies. I have my own team of auditors, but they are trained to look at balance sheets, not character. Tell me what you've found, and tell me what you haven't written in your letter." Sophia took a deep breath. She laid out everything, not with emotion, but with the cool, factual precision of a scholar presenting her thesis. She started with the affair and the embezzlement, providing him with a copy of her spreadsheet, complete with dates, amounts, and cross-referenced travel records. Adrian listened patiently, his expression unreadable, his gaze never leaving her face. Then she moved on to the larger betrayal. She spoke of Jacob's public narrative as a self-made man, how he had systematically erased her own foundational contributions, and more importantly, Adrian's overwhelming financial backing. She explained how Jacob had leveraged the company's success to build his own personal brand, a cult of personality that was now inextricably linked with Aura Innovations. "He doesn't see himself as a steward of your investment, Adrian," she concluded, her voice steady. "He sees himself as a king, and he believes the company is his divine right. He has become a liability." Adrian was silent for a long time. His fingers steepled before him. He looked at the detailed spreadsheet, then back at her. "I invested in Jacob Croft's idea, not his character," he said finally, a note of regret in his voice. "I saw the spark of a brilliant concept for sustainable energy. I funded it and stepped back, as is my custom. I give people enough rope to either build a ladder or a noose. It seems Mr. Croft has chosen the latter." He leaned forward slightly. "What is it you want, Sophia?" This was the critical question. She could have asked for a quiet divorce, a generous settlement for Jacob to be fired discreetly, but that wasn't justice. That was a private arrangement that would allow Jacob to save face, to perhaps even spin the story in his favor. "I want the truth to be made public," she said, her voice unwavering. "He has built his life on a lie, and he has used my silence and your anonymity as its foundation. I want that foundation to crumble, and I want it to happen at the moment of his greatest triumph." She told him about the Innovator of the Year award at the Starlight Foundation Gala. She described the stage, the cameras, the audience of 100 influential people. She laid out her plan, a piece of dramatic theatre that would be so public, so shocking it could not be spun or denied. Adrian listened, a slow smile spreading across his face. It was the smile of a grandmaster at a chess tournament who sees his opponent's fatal error 10 moves in advance. "It's poetic," he mused, "and brutal. I've always believed that public arrogance deserves public humiliation." He tapped his finger on the table. "You have my full support, Sophia, and my resources. I will make a few calls. The board of directors at Aura answer to me, though most of them don't even know it. When the time comes, they will fall in line." He then looked at her, his expression softening. "But I must ask you, are you prepared for this? It will be a spectacle. Your life will be turned upside down." "My life is already upside down," Sophia replied, a new strength in her voice. "I'm just turning it right side up again." Over the next 2 weeks, they worked in secret. Adrian's legal team, a discreet group of the sharpest lawyers in the country, quietly prepared divorce papers for Sophia and a motion for an emergency board meeting to terminate Jacob's contract for cause citing the gross misuse of company funds she had uncovered. They prepared a press release and a shareholder notification timed to be released at the exact moment the drama unfolded. Adrian also arranged for his own head of security to be at the gala, and for the lighting director, an employee of a company he owned, to be ready with a secondary spotlight. Every detail was meticulously planned. On the day of the gala, Adrian sent a car to a small hotel where Sophia had been staying for the past 2 days, having told Jacob she was visiting a sick aunt. A team of stylists, Adrian's personal team, not Jacob's, was there to help her. They didn't try to transform her into someone she wasn't. They simply amplified her natural elegance and grace, clothing her in the sapphire gown that symbolized her newfound power. As she was getting ready, a courier delivered a small velvet box. Inside was a magnificent diamond bracelet. The attached card read, "A strong foundation needs a touch of brilliance. Your father would be proud. A." When she was finally ready, she looked at herself in the mirror. The tired, uncertain woman from 3 weeks ago was gone. In her place stood a woman who had been underestimated, betrayed and pushed to the brink, but who had refused to break. She had not only survived, she had taken control of the entire game. She was no longer Sophia Croft, the CEO's wife. She was Sophia Miller, her father's daughter. And she was ready for her grand entrance. Back in the ballroom, the silence following Jacob's kiss was so complete, it felt like a physical presence. On stage, Seraphina Vance's triumphant smirk had dissolved into a mask of confusion. The adoration she expected from the crowd had been replaced by 1,000 pairs of staring, judgmental eyes. Jacob, his face ashen, could only watch as Sophia and Adrian Finch advanced. Their walk was not hurried. It was a slow, regal procession down the center aisle. Every step Sophia took was filled with a purpose that seemed to ripple through the room. She was not a victim seeking pity. She was a queen, reclaiming her throne. The cameras, which had been greedily focused on the scandal on stage, now swiveled in unison, capturing this new, far more compelling drama. Who was this man? The question was on everyone's lips. The older titans of industry recognized him immediately, their jaws slackening in disbelief. The younger tech entrepreneurs and socialites only saw a distinguished, impeccably dressed older gentleman, but the sheer power of his presence combined with the context of his arrival told them he was someone of immense importance. Jacob's mind raced, trying to process the impossible. Adrian Finch, here with his wife. It didn't compute. Finch was a ghost, a name on a document from years ago, a silent partner he had long since dismissed as irrelevant. He had built this company. It was his. How could this be happening? Sophia and Adrian stopped directly in front of the stage, their path forcing the event's organizers and the stunned chairman to part before them. Sophia's eyes clear and cold as diamonds locked onto Jacob's. There was no hatred in her gaze, no pain. There was only a profound, dismissive finality. "Jacob," she said, her voice perfectly calm, yet carrying to every corner of the silent hall. "You seem to have forgotten some introductions." Jacob was speechless. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. He looked at Seraphina, whose face was now a picture of dawning panic. She had hitched her wagon to a falling star. Adrian Finch stepped forward slightly. He didn't raise his voice, but his quiet, authoritative tone commanded absolute attention. "Good evening, everyone." He began, his gaze sweeping across the room before settling on the stage. "For those of you who do not know me, my name is Adrian Finch, and for Mr. Croft, who seems to be suffering from a lapse in memory, I will clarify. I am the founder and majority shareholder of Finch Holdings Group, which owns a 75% controlling stake in Aura Innovations." A wave of audible gasps rolled through the ballroom. Board members from Aura, seated at various tables, looked at each other in stunned confusion. They had always dealt with Jacob directly. They had no idea. "Mr. Croft has been the public face of the company." Adrian continued, his voice as sharp and cutting as a scalpel. A CEO given a great deal of autonomy to execute a vision I initially funded. I believe in letting talent flourish, but I also believe in accountability and integrity." He gestured gracefully towards Sophia. "This is Sophia Miller Croft. She is not only Mr. Croft's wife and a foundational investor in this company, but she is also the brilliant researcher who recently brought to my attention a series of alarming financial activities." Jacob's legs felt weak. Embezzlement. She knew. She had gone around him straight to the source of all power. He felt a primal wave of terror wash over him, so potent it was nauseating. "Activities," Adrian said, letting the word hang in the air, that include the systematic misuse of corporate funds to the tune of several $1 million. Funds used to finance a lifestyle and a relationship that clearly have no place in our company's business. His eyes flickered briefly toward Serafina, a look of such utter contempt that she visibly flinched and took a step back from Jacob as if his toxicity were suddenly radioactive. The crowd began to murmur, the shock giving way to the delicious, vicious thrill of a public execution. Jacob Croft, the golden boy, the innovator of the year, was a fraud, a thief, an adulterer. The labels were materializing in the air around him, sticking to his Tom Ford suit like tar. He looked desperately at Sophia, a silent, pathetic plea in his eyes. He had underestimated her so profoundly, so completely, that it was in itself his greatest failure. He had seen a quiet, bookish wife, a relic of his past to be discarded. He had failed to see the razor-sharp mind, the core of steel she had inherited from her father. He had forgotten that the quietest people often have the most to say when they finally choose to speak. And now Sophia was about to deliver the final killing blow. The stage was set, the audience was waiting, and the curtain was about to fall on his entire life. Sophia took a small step forward, retrieving a crisp white envelope from the small clutch she was carrying. The move was so deliberate, so theatrical that a hush fell over the room once more. All eyes were on her. She held the envelope up for Jacob to see. Her name was not on it. Instead, the elegant script of a top-tier law firm was visible in the top left corner. "You gave a lovely speech, Jacob," she said, her voice devoid of any emotion except a chilling sort of clarity. "You spoke about partnership, about sacrifice, about building a future. It was very inspiring. But you and I have very different ideas about what those words mean." She walked up the 2 small steps to the stage, her heels clicking with resolute finality on the polished surface. She didn't look at the crowd. She didn't look at the award Jacob was still clutching like a shield. She looked only at him. "You wanted to share your moment with your true partner," she said, the quote marks almost audible in her tone. "You wanted to make a grand declaration, so I thought I should make one of my own." She stopped directly in front of him, so close she could see the sweat beading on his upper lip, the panicked darting of his eyes. She extended the envelope to him. "These are divorce papers, Jacob," she announced, her voice ringing out in the silence. "They cite adultery and financial fraud as the primary causes. All of our joint assets have been frozen pending the investigation you are about to face. The penthouse, the cars, the accounts, they are all part of the life you built with stolen money. It's over." Jacob stared at the envelope as if it were a venomous snake. His hand, the one not holding the award, shook uncontrollably. He didn't take it. On the floor below, Adrian Finch delivered the corporate coup de grace. "Furthermore," he stated calmly, "pursuant to the bylaws of Aura Innovations, I have just called an emergency telephonic meeting of the board of directors. The vote was unanimous, As of this moment, Jacob Croft is terminated as CEO effective immediately. His corporate accounts have been suspended, and security is on their way to escort him from the premises. Ms. Vance. He added, his gaze shifting to Seraphina. You would be wise to tender your resignation before the end of the night. The audit will be extensive. Seraphina looked as though she had been struck by lightning. Her face, which had been a mask of triumph only minutes earlier, was now a crumpled mess of fear and humiliation. Without a word, she turned and fled the stage, disappearing through a side exit. Her red dress a final pathetic flash of color. She was the first rat off a sinking ship. Jacob was alone, trapped in the glare of the spotlight he had so desperately craved. The crowd was a faceless jury, their whispers the sound of his social and professional obituary being written in real time. Sophia placed the envelope on a small table next to the podium. I believe this is yours, she said simply. Then she did something no one expected. She gently took the Innovator of the Year award from his nerveless grasp. His fingers offered no resistance. He was a statue, paralyzed by the totality of his ruin. She turned to face the audience, holding the crystal trophy. Innovation is not just about technology, she said. Her voice filled with a newfound strength that captivated everyone. It's about integrity. It's about building something that lasts on a foundation of truth. Aura Innovations was built on a brilliant idea, an idea that I, and more significantly, Mr. Adrian Finch believed in. That idea has been tarnished by greed and deceit. She looked towards Adrian, who gave her a slight, approving nod. But tonight it will be renewed, she declared. The company will move forward under new leadership with a renewed commitment to the principles on which it was truly founded. She placed the award on the podium, claiming the space as her own. She had taken his triumph, his speech, his stage, and his future, all in the space of 5 minutes. It wasn't an act of revenge. It was a reclamation. 2 discreet but imposing men in dark suits. Adrian's security detail were now walking towards the stage. Their purpose was clear. Jacob finally broke. The facade of the charismatic CEO shattered, revealing the desperate, terrified man beneath. Sophia, please, he whispered, his voice cracking. Don't do this. Sophia looked at him one last time, at the man she had once loved, the man who had become a stranger, and then an enemy. You did this, Jacob, she said softly, but with no hint of pity. You just didn't realize I was the one who would be handing you the bill. She turned her back on him and gracefully descended the stairs, rejoining Adrian. As the security guards reached the stage to escort a broken Jacob Croft away from the wreckage of his life, Sophia and Adrian turned and walked toward the grand exit, leaving the chaos and the whispers behind them. They didn't look back. There was nothing left to see. The aftermath of the gala was a firestorm. The story was on every news site and society blog by morning. Gala takedown, CEO fired, divorced on stage. The Croft coupe billionaire Adrian Finch emerges from shadows, the woman who burned down her husband's empire. The video clips of Jacob's kiss, followed by Sophia's grand entrance, went viral. Jacob Croft became a pariah overnight, a cautionary tale whispered in boardrooms and at cocktail parties across the country. He was hit with a barrage of lawsuits from the company for embezzlement and from shareholders for misrepresentation. The divorce was swift and brutal. With the evidence Sophia had compiled, he had no leverage. He lost everything: the job, the penthouse, the reputation. The man who had stood at the pinnacle of success found himself in a desolate, empty freefall. Seraphina Vance had disappeared. Her social media accounts deleted, her career in marketing vaporized. But Sophia's story was just beginning. In the week following the gala, Adrian Finch officially appointed an interim CEO for Aura Innovations. He also made another announcement that sent a second shockwave through the financial world. He was creating a new independent oversight committee on the board of directors, tasked with ensuring ethical governance and corporate responsibility. Its first appointed chairwoman was Sophia Miller. She initially hesitated, unsure if she was qualified for such a role. "I'm an art historian, Adrian, not a businesswoman," she told him over coffee in his private library. "Nonsense," he replied, his eyes twinkling. "You are one of the most brilliant investigators I have ever met. You see patterns others miss. You value truth and provenance above all else. That is precisely what this company needs. Not another salesman, but a guardian. Your father built things with integrity, Sophia. It's in your blood." And so she accepted. She moved out of the sterile penthouse and into a charming brownstone in Greenwich Village, filling it with the books, art, and vintage furniture she truly loved. She shed the name Croft like a heavy coat she was forced to wear, and became Sophia Miller again. Her work on the board was transformative. She wasn't loud or aggressive in meetings. Instead, she was prepared. She asked incisive questions, demanded transparency, and championed initiatives that focused on long-term sustainability over short-term profits. She earned the respect of the other board members, not through intimidation, but through her formidable intellect and unwavering integrity. She was no longer a shadow. She was a force. Her relationship with Adrian grew into a deep and meaningful friendship, a mentorship built on mutual respect. He saw in her the daughter he never had, and she saw in him a figure of quiet strength and wisdom, a link to the father she had adored. Months later, Sophia was walking through the Museum of Modern Art, losing herself in the quiet beauty of a Monet, when she felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in years. Her life was her own. It was a life she had fought for, a life she had built not on a facade of wealth, but on a foundation of her own strength. The spectacular implosion of Jacob Croft was not the end of her story. It was the violent, fiery, and necessary prologue. The real story was this: the quiet moments, the meaningful work, the freedom to be herself. She had walked through the ashes of a life that was a lie, and had stepped into the dawn of one that was true. She had faced the ultimate betrayal, and had not only survived, she had innovated. And that was an award no one could ever take away from her. 6 months after the Starlight Gala, the name Sophia Miller had become synonymous with integrity. The sensationalism of that night had faded, replaced by a quiet, growing respect within the business community. At Aura Innovations, she was no longer seen as the wronged wife who had orchestrated a dramatic coup. She was Chairwoman Miller, a formidable presence whose meticulous preparation and unwavering ethical compass had become the company's new North Star. She had navigated the company through the turbulent waters of Jacob's departure with a steady hand, reassuring shareholders and rebuilding employee morale. The stock had not only recovered, it had climbed. Her life had found a new, fulfilling rhythm. Her days were spent in boardrooms and research libraries, her evenings in quiet contemplation in her Greenwich Village home. The ghosts of her past life with Jacob were finally beginning to recede. The challenge arrived on a crisp autumn Tuesday in the sterile quiet of the 40th floor conference room. It came in the form of a single, ominous report from Aura's South American division: the Viridian Dam Project. The Viridian Dam was a legacy project initiated nearly a decade ago, long before Jacob's rise to CEO. It was a massive hydroelectric facility deep in the Amazon basin, intended to be the crown jewel of Aura's green energy portfolio. It was also a project championed by several of the current board members, men who had supported Sophia's takeover and now considered her an ally. The report, however, was terrifying. An independent geological survey, one Sophia herself had commissioned as part of her new transparency protocols, revealed that the initial environmental and structural assessments from 10 years prior had been deliberately falsified. The bedrock was far less stable than reported, and the dam's construction had caused irreversible ecological damage, poisoning a local water source and displacing an indigenous community that the original report claimed did not exist. Worse hairline fractures were beginning to appear in the main concrete wall. The Viridian Dam wasn't a jewel. It was a ticking time bomb, both literally and for the company's reputation. Sophia presented the findings to the board. The air in the room grew heavy. The cost to decommission the project safely would be astronomical, warned Marcus Thorne, the CFO. We're talking billions. It would wipe out our profits for the next 5 years. The stock would plummet. But the cost of doing nothing, Sophia countered, her voice calm but firm. The environmental impact is already a catastrophe. If that dam fails, Marcus, the loss of life will be on our hands. We will be ruined, and we will deserve to be. This project predates all of us here, another board member argued, shifting uncomfortably. Jacob inherited it. We inherited it from him. Can't we mitigate this quietly? Reinforce the structure, pay off the locals. Sophia looked at the faces around the table. They were good men, but they were businessmen conditioned to think in terms of profit and loss. They saw a financial crisis. She saw a moral one. This was the first true test of the new aura innovations. The time for quietly is over, she declared. We will be fully transparent. We will halt all operations. We will fund the relocation and compensation of the displaced community. And we will work with international experts to decommission that dam, whatever the cost. It was a bold, terrifying decision, but with Adrian's silent backing via a secure video link, the board reluctantly agreed. They were bracing for a storm, but they believed they could control the narrative, framing it as an act of corporate responsibility. They were wrong. 2,000 miles away, in a cramped, soulless apartment in a city he once owned, Jacob Croft read the business news on a flickering laptop screen. His Tom Ford suits were gone, sold for a fraction of their worth. His penthouse was a bitter memory. His days were a monotonous cycle of cheap whiskey and simmering rage. His only connection to his past life being an obsessive monitoring of Aura's stock ticker. He was a ghost, haunting the periphery of a world that had ejected him. The news of Sophia's success was a physical torment. He saw her quoted in the Wall Street Journal, her serene face a constant reminder of his humiliation. He hated her with a purity he had never felt for anything in his life. When the first whispers of trouble with the Viridian project surfaced on insider trading forums, Jacob felt a jolt of something he hadn't felt in months: hope. Malicious, venomous hope. He knew all about the Viridian Dam. He knew its secrets. During his early years as COO, he had been the one to bury the negative survey reports. He had been the one to sign off on the cheaper substandard materials to boost the profit margins. He had a file, a digital ghost of his own, containing copies of the original damning documents he had kept as insurance against the very board members who now sat in judgment of him. He had never needed it. Until now. He couldn't attack Sophia on her own merits. Her integrity was infuriatingly real. But he could attack the institution she now led. He could use the company's past sins to taint her present. He would make her look like a hypocrite, a fraud, just like him, trying to get ahead of a scandal she couldn't contain. he created an anonymous email account and contacted Ben Carter, a notoriously aggressive financial journalist, known for his take no prisoners style. The email was simple. I have the real story on the Aura Viridian Dam project. Documents the board doesn't want you to see. They are trying to cover up a decade of corruption, and their new chairwoman is in on it. The following Friday, the story broke. Carter's article was a masterpiece of character assassination. It was published not in a niche financial paper, but on the front page of a major online news portal, complete with screaming headlines, Aura's Green Innovation, a Toxic Lie. The article laid out the entire conspiracy in sordid detail, using scans of the original suppressed reports, the ones from Jacob's ghost file. But the spin was what made it so lethal. It didn't credit Sophia for uncovering the problem. Instead, it painted her as a panicked executive caught in a lie and forced to come clean only when the threat of the dam's collapse became undeniable. Carter suggested that her transparency initiative was a desperate PR move to preempt a scandal she had known about for months. Sophia Miller, the article concluded, promised a new era of integrity for Aura. Instead, it seems she has simply put a more elegant face on the same old corporate deceit. The Queen is just like the king she deposed. The impact was immediate and devastating. The stock market opened with Aura's stock in a nosedive. The carefully planned press conference about their responsible decommissioning plan was now useless. They were no longer in control of the narrative. They were on the defensive, reacting to a story that made them look like villains. In her office, Sophia read the article, her hands turning to ice. The level of detail the specific documents cited, it was an attack from the inside. But no one on the current board would do this. Then it hit her a cold, sickening certainty. There was only one person who had this information and this much hatred. The ghost in the machine wasn't a metaphor. It was Jacob. He was ruined, but he wasn't done. He couldn't rebuild his own kingdom, so he had decided to burn hers to the ground, pulling her down into the ashes with him. The battle she thought she had won was, it turned out, only the opening act. And so the story of Jacob Croft serves as a stark reminder. Empires built on lies are destined to crumble. He craved the spotlight, and in the end, that very light exposed him for the fraud he was. But the true heart of this story isn't his downfall. It's Sophia's rise. It's a testament to the incredible strength of those who are underestimated. It shows that integrity, intelligence, and quiet courage are the most powerful forces of all. She didn't just get revenge. She reclaimed her life, her name, and her power, proving that the best victory is not destroying your enemy, but building a better future for yourself. If this story of justice and empowerment resonated with you, and if you believe in the power of truth, please take a moment to hit that like button. Share this video with someone who might need to hear a story of strength and resilience. And of course, if you want more compelling stories like this one, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Thank you for listening.